Hi, you're at Real Turkey channel, and my name is Atilla Yesilada. I'm reaching out to you from my home studios in Göktürk, Istanbul. It's midnight, another sleepless night, because I have a topic in my mind I need to share with the world, otherwise it will drive me crazy. And it is the crackdown on Turkish corporates, which started somewhere in autumn and has accelerated since then. The title is Turkey is Cleaning Her Bowels. I plagiarized it from a columnist, meaning that shady activities, tax evasion, money laundering will no longer be tolerated in the Turkish corporate sector. In other words, it seems that Turkey is staging a clean hands operation, which aims to end the illegitimate activities I described previously, as well as cutting the links between the narco mafia and the corporate sector. Actually, there could be other reasons, some of them political, and these need to be investigated. These operations do have macroeconomic, political issues, and they certainly do have an impact on Turkish financial markets. And another very crucial market for Turkey to roll over its maturing debts, which is the Eurobond market, because some of the companies that are affected by these operations do have dollar and euro bonds outstanding. And the way the target companies are treated according to the law is extremely deleterious or harmful to lenders. Essentially, Turkish law states that if there is strong suspicion that a company is involved in money laundering, terror financing, it can be turned over to a trustee without a court mandate. The prosecutor's request is sufficient for a company's assets and management to be turned over to Turkey's central trustee agency, which is the Turkish Deposit Insurance Fund. You do have deposit insurance funds in your country, the primary purpose of which is to insure your deposits up to a certain level in commercial banks. In Turkey, Turkish Deposit Insurance Fund does fulfill that obligation, but it's also the depository of those companies whose owners have been put in prison or charged with serious financial or real crimes. Currently, Turkish Deposit Insurance Fund has over 1,100 companies in its roster. We don't know the turnover. We think it could be close to $1 billion or more, and it employs more than 30,000 people. It's one of the largest holding companies in Turkey. I'm trying to structure this video in my mind as I speak. As you can tell, I always speak impromptu. I don't use a prompter. I don't write text. This is not the way I roll. Whatever comes to my mind, as long as I think I've gotten the idea across. First, I want to describe how these sting operations started and which companies have been affected. Then I'm going to claim that actually there are three different and completely unrelated processes are in motion. Some of them are extremely legitimate, some of dubious quality. Then I'm going to give you the future, what will happen in the Turkish corporate sector within the next 3 or 12 months. And the worst case scenario of these corporate sting operations actually being a political design by Mr. Erdogan to reshuffle Turkish private sector capital to his closest cronies to feed his regime. But of course, there are other explanations as well, which I shall mention at the end. And of course, close by saying a few words about the macroeconomics of corporate raids. Turkish business community is almost without exemption pro-Erdogan because they had to be. Those who resisted Mr. Erdogan have been taken over and devastated in the most brutal methods possible. And eventually, these brave pro-opposition businesses have sold out or have shut their doors. Not the entire business community is pro-AKP or Islamist, but they have to pretend to be so. In Turkey's cronies regime, you have to have good connections to AKP to get anything done that involves the civil service, the state bureaucracy. So these operations have been fairly rare, nothing of noteworthy in the most recent years, simply because, as I've said, the entire business community pays tribute to Mr. Erdogan, keeps its mouth shut, uh, and if it is asked to donate to AKP's campaign finances or to rallies or to a municipal race, they voluntarily do so. Suddenly, I think it was in October, we woke up and found out that a very well respected smuggling family, Can Holding, has been taken over by Turkish Deposit Insurance Corporation or Fund on accusations of money laundering and oil and cigarette smuggling. That surprised people, not because the charges seemed to be completely unwarranted, but simply because the authorities waited this long. I mean, everybody knew that the family of Can Holding were smugglers, which is nothing to be ashamed of. I mean, they are from the Kurdish region of Turkey, where the main economic activity is smuggling. But the interesting part was coming from humble origins as a food processing company and then, an owner of small industrial enterprises, Can Holding grew exponentially. At the time it was taken over by the Turkish Deposit Insurance Fund, it owned a private university, a TV and radio network, the Habertürk Group, as well as businesses in almost every other industry of Turkey with billions of liras of turnover. Immediately, of course, suspicion started that this was Mr. Erdogan's attempt to redesign Turkish private capital as it is doing to Turkish politics, where he is trying to completely get rid of the main opposition party, CHP. The Can Holding operation led to another major holding company, also respected and well known, Mr. Turgay Ciner's Ciner Holding slash Park Holding, which is not involved in smuggling. I can't prove it's involved in money laundering, but it's a huge holding company which specializes on soda ash. And it has operations not only in Turkey, but in the United States as well. Mr. Turgay Ciner, by design or luck, happened to be in London. He's in his 70s. I don't think he's going to return. But among those who are arrested is a gentleman who shared my line of business activity, which is he was a presenter in Turkey's premier financial TV, Bloomberg HT. No relation to Global Bloomberg, just got a license to use the name. He was a moderator there, as well as a commentator, and suddenly he was appointed to the board of directors of Turkey's largest private bank, İşbank. Mr. Turgay Ciner also cooperated in broadening his soda ash operations with Turkey's pride, the multinational glass and glassware company Sise Cam or Shishe Cam. In fact, the American operations were a joint venture, partly funded by İşbank. So immediately, of course, suspicions grew that Mr. Erdogan wanted to get at Shishe Cam and then its majority owner İş Bankası, which are extremely profitable assets, with the intention of eventually turning them over to its cronies. The suspicions were bolstered by the fact that in the past Mr. Erdogan want the state to take over İşbank, but because of international repercussions, decided not to. So now that he's all powerful and enjoys the support of Putin and Trump, he may be trying again. The market went down. The spreads or interest rates on Turkish corporate bonds went up in the Eurobond market. And then, as everyone expected, these corporate operations became a daily affair. But we weren't proven right in our suspicion that Mr. Erdogan was simply reshuffling Turkish private capital to his cronies. The trail went somewhere else. The trail went to electronic processing or payment processing systems. A string of them have been charged with money laundering and taken over. Then, suddenly, a huge scandal blew up in Turkish football or soccer, if you come from the United States, which is by far the most popular professional sport in Turkey. 50 referees have been charged with illegal gambling. This was about a month ago. As we speak, newspapers report that up to 1,000 professional players, club owners, and managers are being investigated in this illegal betting scam. Now, I should say a few words about Turkish sports betting or betting at all, virtual betting. It is permitted, but it's a monopoly. There is a company called Demir Oran Holding, owned by a very dear ally of Mr. Erdogan, which has a license for national lottery and for a variety of sports betting enterprises. Also, if you go to its website, you can play virtual roulette, poker, or any other game that's currently played in Las Vegas. So betting per se is not illegal, but doing it without a license is illegal. So the investigation about how referees squandered their money or betted on sports events obviously led to these electronic payment systems, which had proliferated very rapidly in Turkey over the last 3 years. As I shoot this video, 10 out of 62 sundry electronic payment systems have been charged and duly taken over by Turkish Deposit Insurance Corporation or Fund. Wait, the story gets even more interesting. One day, our economy czar, Mr. Mehmet Şimşek, attended a capital markets conference, and among many things he said, mostly positive about the future of Turkish capital markets, he said, some of the asset management companies are actually used to manipulate stock prices. These practices should cease immediately. Otherwise, the law will punish these people. Barely the ink has dried on his warning. We have seen a small asset manager called Q Bank, Q Investment Bank, and then another slightly larger one, Investco, also taken over by Turkish Deposit Insurance Corporation on charges of manipulating stock prices. This is where we stand. More than 50 companies charged, turned over to the central trustee, Turkish Deposit Insurance Fund. Investigations ongoing, hundreds of people held without bail until trial. And the overall fear that these operations is going to continue. Yes, they are going to continue for different reasons. The first reason, the first visible reason, we found out yesterday that the global money laundering watchdog, a subsidiary of OECD called Financial Action Task Force, is coming to Turkey for routine conversations or routine supervision event. FATF is a very respectable global outfit which ranks countries in terms of their compliance with terror financing and money laundering laws. If a country is found missing on one criteria or the other, it's demoted to gray list, which means every bank that deals with any entity in this country must be extremely careful not to become involuntarily a conduit for illegal activities. It's a disaster. I mean, countries go to extreme lengths to get out of the gray list. There's also a blacklist, but this is sort of like northwestern Somalia or, Gudu Gudu land in Africa. I don't know which countries would be so stupid as not to comply with FATF regulations. Turkey was in the gray list and then was promoted to the top league, the white list, which Mr. Mehmet Şimşek, our economy czar, sold as a major achievement, which it is. I've been in the financial industry for 35 years, and if a country is in the gray list, I mean, you have to go through hoops just to open a savings account or buy financial assets in a foreign country. People just don't want to do business with Turks. They don't want to be tainted by any kind of illegitimacy. So that explains the crackdown on electronic payment systems because this is a huge loophole. The banks had already warned the government not to issue that many licenses simply because the regulatory framework and the regulators weren't ready. And it was impossible to go through the millions of transactions that take place each day to find out which ones contravened FATF regulations or the country's regulations. I think Turkey will not be demoted to the gray list, but FATF will leave behind a to-do list that regulations need to be tightened further. Interestingly, as these electronic payments systems, online brokerages, and online crypto platforms, crypto exchanges come under scrutiny, it will be determined that some of them have acted as conduits for Turkey's very lucrative narco trade. If you haven't watched my previous video, you will see that Turkey has become a major headache for European and Middle Eastern countries as the regional distribution hub of cocaine and now more and more methamphetamine, meth, crystal meth. In fact, Turkey has moved up to production. And there are huge amounts of revenue generated by these activities, as well as the national drug problem, and that money needs to be whitewashed. The traditional method of whitewashing money is casinos. And the Turkish Republic of Northern Cyprus, which has legal gambling in casinos, has been used for that purpose, but also Georgia, and I suspect Bulgaria as well. But the regime has changed in Turkish Republic of Northern Cyprus. A pro-Erdogan President has been replaced with a social democrat who wants to talk peace with Greek Cypriots and eventually become a member of EU. So these activities will be more strictly monitored. As a result, the narco trade has shifted to crypto exchanges. It's used for that purpose all over the world. I'm not against crypto assets, neither do I claim that their primary usefulness or utility is in whitewashing illegitimate money, but it happens because it's impossible to track who has done what. So, after FATF leaves Turkey, these investigations will encompass more electronic payment systems, more probably electronic brokerages, and then they will advance to companies which narco traders use as fronts to launder money in these exchanges. Secondly, yeah, speculation and manipulation is rampant in Turkish stock exchange because it's actually a small cap heaven. The average free float for listed companies is something like $50 million. Okay. Obviously, there are companies with huge free floats in billions of dollars, but there are at most a dozen. Uh, and all of these companies are under the threat of mafia or Erdogan's cronies to do certain things. I'm not assuming or accusing any Turkish corporation of conducting or engaging in illegal activities, but I suspect that it's a widespread practice. Sometimes voluntarily because they want to avoid taxes or they want to, front their own stock. Sometimes because they have been threatened by mafia. So Turkey's budding institutional money management industry is also under threat, and we could see large money managers, asset management families being taken over by Turkish Deposit Insurance Corporation. Finally, even though operations against very large companies have ceased for the time being, that doesn't mean Erdogan doesn't want to reshuffle the ownership of Turkish capital. Remember, he was known for mega projects, which are state-of-the-art suspension bridges, underwater transport tunnels, a huge airport, which is the pride of Turkey. Very efficient and modern, but expensive infrastructure. But all of these were built with off-budget funds or treasury guarantees by Erdogan's cronies. Now, these people are starving because there are no more mega projects in Turkey. Turkey needs to cut its budget deficit, not only because it's crowding, the borrowing to finance that deficit is crowding out private investment, but also because cutting the budget deficit is almost as efficient as tight monetary policy in terms of fighting inflation. Mehmet Şimşek is running a tight ship at the Treasury, so there are really not as many funds as 3 years ago that flow to these crony companies in terms of state procurement tenders. So it is still possible, though I don't have enough evidence to prove, that to feed his core cronies, those who support his regime, Mr. Erdogan would eventually go after completely legitimate and honest companies simply because they have a great cash flow and his cronies need more tribute. All in all, Turkish corporate sector is in turmoil. It has been squeezed by relatively high interest rates, and relatively overvalued Turkish lira. Overseas markets are not growing. Chinese imports are flooding the market, and Turkish corporates are highly inefficient, unproductive, and over-leveraged. This is a disaster scenario. Since tighter monetary and fiscal policy will last for the foreseeable future to bring inflation down from, say, 30% to 10%, cash flow will be limited, domestic demand will be limited. Now, these people are also dealing with confiscation risk. As I've said or tried to say, in Turkey, laws are so vague, everybody can be a criminal. Tomorrow, I can be arrested on 30 different charges. There is no rule of law. The judiciary is completely under the sway of Mr. Erdogan. I support clean hands operations, and I'm fairly sure Turkey's top-tier corporates, whether they're financial or non-financial, also want the bad apples, the bad actors in the industry to be weeded out because they're, unfair competitors. But in a country where there is no reliable judiciary to separate the innocent from the guilty, essentially there is a fear that no matter how law compliant a company is, it will be taken over if Mr. Erdogan or his close friends want to own it. So, A, these operations will go on. They must, if Turkey wishes to remain in the whitelist of FATF and not to undergo further sanctions by neighboring countries. B, to clean up the stock exchange and to stop manipulation, which has wiped out tens of thousands of small investors. Three, eventually, maybe, Mr. Erdogan needs more money to feed his regime. All of this is incredibly bad for business sentiment, which is kind of showing up in the polls in the sense that business sentiment indicators are still in the positive territory, but compared to the recent highs, they are fairly low. There is anecdotal but reliable evidence of Turkish companies diversifying their assets away from Turkey by opening manufacturing outlets in countries like Egypt and even in Central Asia. Soon they will be doing so in Azerbaijan and Armenia as well, which of course means that in a savings constrained country like Turkey, precious funds that can go to building new factories or lending to them is going abroad. Eventually, this process, if not managed very carefully, will lower Turkey's per capita growth rate and may lead to sudden volatility in Turkey's equity and Eurobond markets. Oh boy, I got it out of my chest. Now I can go back to sleep or whatever I do at 2 a.m. in the morning. I want to thank you for watching my tiny channel. My last video got 50 comments, which I read, most of which I answer, and I love being trolled, so please keep them coming. And if you like it, subscribe or share it with your friends. No matter what, have a good day. This is Atilla Yesilada saying goodbye from Istanbul.